Okay.
So, how did you meet your husband?
The way I met Hubert, he lived in a little community close to mine. We didn't live in the same little community. And he went to Cooper High School and I went to Commerce High School, and they were rivals. Nobody from Commerce High School would go with somebody at Cooper. If you did, you got teased about it. So in the years I was growing up, when a couple or boy, whoever, had a party, it wasn't just his age group that went, the whole family went. The brothers and sisters and mother and daddy, and they met in one room and they got young people in the other. And you played games. One of the games you played was go walking. I can't remember, we did something to find out who you go walking with. And so your granddaddy came in with a girl that was a friend of mine. I don't know who invited them. Probably she did, or somebody invited her. And so that night, I never did even go walking with Daddy. But that night, after they left, her name was Winnell Jones. He took Winnell home, and he came back to the party and took me home. And we started dating, and we dated until he went to the Navy in 1943, and we went with different people during that time. And when he came back, he was decommissioning a ship in Oklahoma. And I had an apartment. At that time, people couldn't find apartments. They were not to be found. But I had some relative. I really never knew exactly how she was related to me. She had an apartment house. So she rented an apartment to me. And so Daddy came to Dallas. When he got off the train from Oklahoma, he came to Dallas and came where I was working. He never let me live this down. He called me. And he told me, and I didn't understand who he was. And I said, "Oh, are you that sailor I met this time?" And he never let me forget that. Well, the story behind that, downstairs, I worked for a rural life insurance company. There was a little cafe, just almost like a drugstore. And that night, I ate a lot of times before I went home in that cafe, so I'd go home and be ready to go to bed. And that night, I sat at a table, and this sailor, I don't know who he is, came and just sat down and started talking. I didn't even know his name. He went his way, and I went mine. And I thought when Daddy called, I thought, well, I told him I worked there, you know. So I thought, well, he's come back. Well, it wasn't him at all. Daddy, all the time, he always told that on me. He thought that was awful. And it was as innocent as it could be, but he didn't know that. Anyway, he came back, and that was the first weekend that he was back in the States. He'd been in the South Pacific all that time. We went somewhere that night. I never will forget. Had to ride the streetcar. We didn't have any other way to go. And he went home and went back to it's some little town in Oklahoma where they were decommissioning the ship. Anyway, the next weekend, I think it was the next one, it might have been the weekend after, he came back that night, called me, and wanted to know if I wanted to go get married.
He asked you on the phone?
Huh?
He asked you on the phone?
Yeah. And I hadn't really thought about it. And he said, why don't we go tonight? He was in the old 1936 Ford that Mr. and Miss Owens had. Didn't have a brake one. Had to run up against something to stop. And we went to Rockwall, got a justice of the peace out of a meeting at church, and he came to the courthouse and married us.
Wow.
Dad had a diary.
Huh?
Dad had a diary in the Navy, a diary.
You know, I don't think he did, but I've got the album. I've got it in there in the closet. of all of his Navy buddies, but it doesn't mean anything to me. It doesn't tell me who they are, or he would know, but I didn't know any of them. But he had another week or two before he could get out of the Navy, so he had to leave early the next morning to go to back to decommission the ship.
What ship was he on, do you know?
Well, I was 20.
No, what ship was he on in the Navy?
The Naos.
Naos?
They were a troop ship, and they transported troops back and forth to battle, and then brought the island troops primarily back home. But now, Dad and I dated all that last year of high school after he took Winnell home. And you know the strange thing, all of those, grandmother was very much opposed to him marrying me. And she thought Winnell was great. And she wanted him to marry Winnell. But what she didn't know, Winnell had an awful reputation. I mean, all the boys knew Winnell, you know. But grandmother never knew this. All the years we were married, grandmother kept in touch with Winnell, and Winnell would come and visit her and want no hard, but told her she never got over granddaddy. I said, too bad.
Where's one now?
I don't know where she lives now, but she would come to Greenville, so she must be in the area somewhere. And she always told grandmother she was sorry that it didn't work out for her and Daddy, but it would never have worked. And Daddy wouldn't have married her.
So after the first time you found out that the people who raised you were your grandparents and not your parents, you found out that Orme was your mom. What happened the first time that you saw Orme after that? I mean,
it was a long time before I saw her. I never saw her very many times at night growing up. You didn't go places then. The only way you had to travel was by wagon, or the old Model T Ford, which was not much better. So if you were 50 miles, you just didn't go very often. The money was so, you had no money for anything. So there was buses if you could afford them. But Orme and Buddy they had no money. They lived doing without a lot of times. So it wasn't a thing we would I suppose in the years I was growing up, I thought Orme was my aunt. And I don't suppose I had seen her more than 5 or 6 times in my whole life. So I never thought anything, I just thought she was an aunt. So for a long time after that, after Daddy and I married, I didn't see Orme. I had nothing against her. I just had no reason to see her. And I remember we were having some problems, Daddy and I were. Gary was a baby. Money was scarce. Daddy was trying to get his college degree. And we, for some reason, would go back and visit on rare occasions. When we went to Buddy and Orme, Buddy loved Hubert, my stepdaddy. He loved Hubert better than his own son, I think. And he would look forward to Hubert coming to see him. So we would go occasionally, and not often, maybe once every 3 or 4 months. You know, we'd go on Saturday and visit with him a while. And sort of, you know, I began to see all the good and not the bad that had been in my mind before. So that we just began to get better acquainted with them, got closer. And
how old were you at this time?
Well, Gary was when he was born, so I must have been 22, 23. So I'd had no bonding with my mother. I hadn't grown up not knowing who she was. But over a period of time, I could see all the good in her. She was a very strong woman, very high principled. She wanted to do what was right, and I appreciated that.
What would have happened if you did not go to Dallas and you'd stayed on the farm? And when Dad got out of the Navy, what would have happened?
we would have probably rented a farm there. And Daddy would probably have rented a farm, and I would have been there working in the field and the garden and house. He would never have gotten his college education. He would never have had the opportunities he had.
Think he'd have been happy as a farmer?
Huh?
Would he have been happy as a farmer?
He probably would be. He was the kind, no matter where he was, he adjusted and made the best of it. Even after he fell and was so crippled and hardly ever free with pain, he never complained. Toward the last days of his life, a time or two, probably no more than twice, I ever remember him saying, I don't know why the Lord let this happen to me. But he still never complained about it. He would have been content wherever, I really think, wherever he was. Now, I wouldn't have been. Well, I might have, I never knew any better. But I have no good memories of the farm. I have nothing but memories of hard work.
So when you bought a farmhouse near Orme, why did you buy that house? When did you buy it? What was the reason behind it?
Well, the reason we bought that farmhouse during that time, Buddy they had gone through lots of hard times. And Buddy had no skills whatsoever. He had a stroke on old Duke, riding the horse. Duke drug him back to the house, stopped in front of the porch for Orme to find him. From that day forward, Buddy never had a good, his life was used, he could eat, feed himself, and halfway get dressed. That's all he could do. He finally learned how to go to the bathroom by himself. And the reason he always wore overalls, and the reason he did, the stroke affected the left side. All of this was paralyzed. So he could put those overalls on and get them fastened up here. And he never had to fasten this. He always left them hanging. If you see a picture of him, you'll always see that hanging down. So he always wore overalls. He would look forward for Hubert coming. One day the farm that we bought was for sale. Mr. and Miss Wattenberg. And the man that owned that, the old man that owned that, was a grandfather to the girl I went to live with when I run off from home. Mr. Wattenberg decided to sell. His wife was a school teacher. And Daddy thought about it a while, and he said, you know, Buddy he wouldn't go to the store and talk to the man. He was ashamed, you know, because he was paralyzed. He felt like he was good for nothing. He couldn't work. He had driven the school bus, but he had never had a good job. But Daddy says, why don't we buy that and put some cattle on there and let Buddy be responsible for that and pay. And that's what we did. We bought the farm, bought cattle, and put on it. So Daddy hired Buddy to see it. And he said, now Buddy, every night, the barn was there where he could see him. He said, you count those cows to be sure all of them come up. If one of them fails to come up, call the veterinary. And that's exactly for all those years. That's the way that worked. And every month, Daddy would go pay Buddy, and he would be so excited. He had a job. He wasn't a lost character anymore. So that was how the farm came into being.